Jaime Osuna was born on March 7, 1988 in Bakersfield, California, and his early life was marked by strife. His mother, Michelle, was described as negligent and emotionally absent. A year after Jaime's birth, his parents separated and Michelle later remarried a man named Jeff. She reportedly never intervened when her new husband physically and emotionally mistreated her son. Now, as a child, Jaime was often denied food when his siblings ate and was sometimes forced to eat on the floor like a dog. His ex-wife, known as Jane Doe in official documents, shared some incidents from his early childhood, stating,
"He was thrown out of a moving car when he was just little, hanging on a tree, not allowed to eat with the family, slept outside in the rain." I don't think you want to talk about it.
It should be noted that some publications have listed Jane's name under other pseudonyms. We're going to refer to her as Jane throughout the episode, and we're also going to make sure all images of her are censored because this appears to be her wishes.
Ultimately, the streets are what ended up raising Jaime, and in Bakersfield, those streets are anything but forgiving. According to Ethan Wiley, a former inmate later held in the same prison as Jaime, Bakersfield is the rotten core of Golden, California. Bakersfield is basically a cesspool of gangs, violence, and drugs. Anywhere you go in Bakersfield, you can find all of those things. There's no part of Bakersfield that's immune. In 2020, Bakersfield set a record of 45 homicides. This rate is significantly higher than most cities of a comparable size, but even back in the 90s, things were not much different. Jaime got involved with gangs at a very young age, and his violent tendencies were pretty visible from the start. Later, Jaime admitted to torturing animals just for fun, and if you don't want to hear this next part, feel free to jump ahead about 10 or 15 seconds. As a child, he would put cats in the freezer and even went so far as microwaving a family pet alive while his mother was out at the store. Jaime's first run-in with the law came in 2005 when he was arrested for assault with a deadly weapon and was detained at the California Youth Authority. His adolescence and early adulthood were mostly spent in and out of detention centers and prisons. He racked up quite a lengthy list of charges, including battery, drug possession, assault, and even attempted murder.
In December of 2008, Jaime went to a party hosted by Jane, who, as we mentioned earlier, would later become his wife. Jane's son from a previous relationship had been pressuring her to throw a party for his high school friends, so she finally agreed. Her nephew, who was just 8 years younger than her, brought Jaime along. At the time, Jane knew nothing about Jaime's violent past. Still, she found him handsome and pleasant looking. Jaime apparently developed a crush on Jane. However, things took a violent turn at the party when Jane was dancing with another guy. To make matters worse, Jane's nephew went out and told Jaime about this. He rushed inside, infuriated, and grabbed a knife. In a jealous rage, he chased the guy around the house and slashed his chest with the blade. He didn't stab deeply to puncture his lungs or anything like that, but he did leave a pretty big gash on his chest. The police were called and the party was shut down. Jaime was arrested on the spot and taken to jail, but he stayed in touch with his new crush through letters. Apparently, he made a good first impression. After his release a year later, Jane picked Jaime up from the prison. By then, he had a tattooed face, something she wasn't particularly fond of. Regardless, the two started seeing each other more often. Despite the chaotic nature of how they met, Jaime was successful at captivating Jane with his talks on psychology and philosophy. To Jane, Jaime felt quite educated, and due to this, she saw past the initial encounter and found herself drawn to his mind.
We'll be back in just 1 minute. Please stick around for the following ad. It not only supports the channel, but it also supports charities in our area.
This week's episode has been brought to you by Raycon, makers of the essential open earbuds. Let Raycon help you stay connected this holiday season while enjoying your favorite music or podcasts. Perfect for a jog, commute, or just kicking back. And this Black Friday and Cyber Monday, you can save up to 30% on all Raycon audio products.
Raycon's essential open earbuds keep your ears open while still delivering crystal clear sound. They sit just outside your ear canal so you can stay tuned into traffic, coworkers, or whatever's happening around you without losing out on music or podcast quality. Lightweight and all-day comfortable, they never feel bulky, and the secure fit means they stay put whether I'm at the gym, out on a walk, or just grinding through my to-do list. Raycon has 36 hours of battery life, and you can connect to multiple devices and switch seamlessly without any hassle. Raycon delivers the same premium audio quality as the big brands, but at half the price. Now add in over 3 million happy customers with a 30-day happiness guarantee, and there's zero reason to go elsewhere. We love our Raycons, and you will too.
So don't wait. Black Friday is just around the corner, and Raycon audio products are up to 30% off site-wide. From everyday essentials to the latest releases, it's the perfect time to upgrade your sound or get ahead on gifting. These early deals won't last long. Shop now before they're gone. Just click the link in the description or go to buyraycon.com/TMMopen to save on Raycon audio products site-wide. Thanks, and back to the episode.
By 2009, Jane discovered she was pregnant. She already had a son from a previous relationship, and this pregnancy left her bedbound and vulnerable. Jaime saw an opportunity. He manipulated her by making her feel cared for. He helped her with her son, he cleaned the house, he cooked her meals, and he constantly pampered her. Jane took the bait. The idea of raising another child as a single mother terrified her, and when she brought up marriage, Jaime readily agreed. In February of 2010, Jaime and Jane exchanged wedding vows at his grandmother's house. Newlyweds seemed happy at first, but Jane would soon realize she had made a terrible mistake in giving Jaime a chance, because just weeks into their marriage, Jaime became violent towards his new wife.
Seemed like any man to look at me, even pregnant. He thought men were checking me out, and I was like, I don't notice it. Like, I feel terrible. I look overweight. But he always thought I was cheating. Late in my pregnancy, I don't remember even what the argument started about. It wasn't even serious. But he pushed me, and I was quite heavy, and I fell over, and I broke a rib. And I went to the ER.
Thankfully, the pregnancy wasn't affected by her fall. Jaime was charged with assault and briefly sent back to prison. When he was released, a restraining order was put in place, and Jane gave birth without him there. According to Jane, Jaime had been excited about becoming a father, and he was furious that his child was born without him being there, even though it was clearly his own fault. Of course, Jaime blamed Jane for it. Despite everything, Jane wanted a better life for her newborn baby. She got back together with Jaime and lifted the restraining order. Jaime started attending anger management classes as part of his rehabilitation. However, it proved to be all for nothing. Soon after the restraining order was lifted, Jane started noticing bizarre behavior in Jaime. She discovered he had started using crystal and that there was no fixing him. Jaime became increasingly paranoid and violent and choked Jane on multiple occasions to the point where she fell unconscious. According to forensic psychologist Dr. Lena Haji, who commented on Jaime's case, people like Jaime just can't be rehabilitated. She said, Mr. Osuna started engaging with drug use at a very young age. It's going to teach him that he needs to numb himself and constantly be high in order to deal with who he is as a person, in order to deal with the world, in order to deal with any kind of relationships. It also helps to facilitate somebody's rage and have them engage in violent acts. For Jane, the mental trauma of staying with Jaime was even worse than the violence, and the toxic and controlling nature proved to be too much for her. The breaking point for Jane came when Jaime allegedly pushed her other child off a bed onto the floor. She decided to kick Jaime out of their shared house, but getting rid of him wasn't going to be so simple. Jaime repeatedly called Jane, harassing and threatening her. She received 30 to 40 texts a day and almost 10 to 15 calls, with Jaime threatening to kill her or worse. Then after some days, the harassment suddenly stopped. Jane was relieved. She assumed that Jaime had been arrested again, and honestly, she couldn't care less as long as he was gone, but what came to light in the following days caught everybody off guard.
While Jane was fortunate enough to escape Jaime alive, another woman wasn't so lucky. In November of 2011, Jaime visited the El Morocco Motel on Golden State Avenue. The motel was situated in one of the worst areas of Bakersfield. Most of the people staying there were long-term tenants. One such resident was 36-year-old Yvette Pena, mother of 6. At the time, Yvette had been living there for about 3 months. She had her own history and had turned to drugs to cope. But unlike Jaime, she never developed violent tendencies. On the night of November 8th, 2011, Jaime spent the night with Yvette at the motel. Tragically, it would be her last night alive. Afterward, Jaime called Jane. He told his ex to watch the news and that he had just killed a woman at the El Morocco Motel. He told her that she'd be next. Investigators and psychologists who work on this case strongly believe that Jaime would have killed Jane without a second thought had she stayed with him any longer. Having lived with Jaime, Jane knew something was seriously wrong and that he was absolutely capable of what he described. She immediately contacted the Kern County Sheriff's Office and asked if there had been any incident at the El Morocco motel. However, the officer didn't take her call seriously. He assumed Jane, as an estranged wife, was probably trying to set her husband up. Little did anyone know that 5 days later, this horrific murder would shock the entire community.
On November 13th, 2011, an exterminator entered the motel room and discovered Yvette's body. Jane called the sheriff's office once again when she heard about the news, and this time she was taken seriously. She was picked up immediately, and as the main lead in what was now an active murder investigation, she was interrogated for nearly 10 hours. What authorities found at the scene was almost beyond comprehension. Yvette had been stabbed 57 times. Her body appeared intentionally positioned with her shins pressed to the floor, backside elevated, and her arms extended forward. 3 knives had been impaled in her back, along with a large pair of scissors. There was evidence she had been assaulted and stabbed several times in her privates. Multiple ligatures were found around her neck, including pantyhose and a green corduroy material that was likely used to strangle her. There was also evidence that Jaime had taken a large metal rod and forced it down Yvette's throat. The crime scene was so brutal that the pathologist who examined Yvette's body listed 3 causes of death: blunt force trauma to the head, asphyxiation, and injuries from sharp force objects. According to Paul Lopez, a private investigator and former correctional officer, I think anyone who's capable of what he did is absolutely a depraved, violent, narcissistic human that has no regard for human life whatsoever and believes he's entitled to take it at his own free will.
When Danielle Peña Gonzalez, Yvette's sister, learned of the horrific details of her sister's death, she was absolutely heartbroken. Danielle had always admired Yvette. She practically raised her. The grief rippled through the entire family, but tragically, they never found the closure they desperately needed. Officials informed them that recovering Yvette's body wasn't possible, as Jaime had violated her so severely that all that could be given were her ashes. What's even more disturbing is the fact that there was no apparent motive behind this murder. The investigators speculate that Jaime probably went to Yvette as a client, but in some of his later conversations with Jane, he would reveal something even more cruel: that he killed innocent Yvette because she resembled Jane. On November 18th, 2011, 5 days after Yvette's body was discovered, Jaime was arrested at a relative's house in central Bakersfield. Investigators had developed intelligence that a family member was helping him hide. Law enforcement got a search warrant and even deployed a SWAT team to apprehend him. Before the raid, Jaime had threatened Jane that he had bombs and explosives and would blow up anyone who would try to arrest him. After a brief standoff, he was taken into custody. His claims about explosives turned out to be nothing more than a wild bluff.
Jaime was transported to the Lerdo pretrial detention facility. Lerdo houses some of the worst criminals in the system, but even among them, Jaime operated on a completely different level of depravity. Jane visited Jaime at the detention center multiple times for some closure on Yvette's murder. What he told her was almost beyond comprehension. Jaime confessed that he had remained in the motel room with Yvette's body until it began to decompose. He admitted to violating her corpse while high on crystal multiple times. The only reason he finally left, in his own words, was because the smell of decomposition had become too unpleasant, even for someone as depraved as him. Jane also noticed Jaime had gotten significantly more facial tattoos. The change was so dramatic that he was barely recognizable from the man she had met years ago. Jaime was reportedly fascinated by the Joker from the Batman comics, and the tattoos stretching horizontally across his lips were meant to mimic that look. He had also lost a considerable amount of weight, likely due to his heavy drug use. Jaime confessed to Jane that he really wanted to kill her, but that the only reason he stopped was because he thought of their son.
Even while confined in one of California's most secure correctional facilities, Jaime Osuna's violent impulses didn't stop. In January of 2012, he became involved in an altercation with another inmate, reportedly due to a minor dispute over noise. Jaime had crafted a crude but deadly weapon called a tomahawk, a prison shank made by melting razor blades obtained from shaving supplies into a toothbrush. The improvised blade could slice through human tissue with terrifying ease. Jaime went after the guy with the weapon hidden in his hands and threw a punch at him. The other inmate, a man considerably larger than Jaime, managed to block the strike and pin him down, but as he wrestled Jaime to the ground, he felt something wet and realized that he was bleeding profusely from his neck, face, and chest. The attack had left 5 deep gashes that would later require 67 stitches to repair. Investigator Paul Lopez later described the severity of the incident, saying, "This wasn't just a jailhouse brawl. He wanted to make a point. You don't do that to somebody unless you're trying to take their life," which tells me a lot about Jaime Osuna, that he is a sick, psychotic person who suffers from multiple mental conditions and should be nowhere around anybody.
When Jane asked Jaime why he was doing this, Jaime replied that he did it to delay his trial. Apparently, he didn't feel safe going to the actual prison system because of the murder he committed. Since Jaime had attempted to kill another inmate, he now faced additional consequences. But Jaime couldn't care less about any of that. He had developed a deeply narcissistic and antisocial personality. In clinical terms, he was a psychopath in every sense of the word. Jaime also began performing rituals in his cell. He drew a large pentagram on the floor and arranged photographs of Yvette Pena around it. The gang coordinator asked why he had created this display. Jaime responded, "Now the bitch can worship her god," referring to himself. This understandably made other inmates and staff extremely uncomfortable. Jaime was initially allowed to keep the markings until officials discovered they were drawn in blood. This raised serious health and safety concerns, and the markings were finally removed. Jaime was officially classified as an extremely dangerous individual who couldn't be safely contained, even in isolation. Everyone around him, whether a guard or another inmate, was at risk of violence. According to inmate Ethan Wiley, if he was able to, he'd kill you without a second thought. You could feel hate radiating off his person, anger and hate. If there was a demon incarnate, I would say Jaime Osuna is it. Evil does not do justice to Jaime Osuna.
Jaime was transferred to a maximum security housing unit that offered the highest level of prisoner isolation. Here, inmates are locked in their cells for 23 hours a day. But even in this restrictive environment, Jaime continued his sadistic behavior. He would flood his cell once or twice a week just for entertainment. He constantly tormented the correctional staff in the most twisted ways he could think of. This is one of those examples. Feel free to skip ahead 5-10 seconds if you want to. On one occasion, he killed a mouse and meticulously peeled off its skin until only the skeleton remained intact. Jaime also continued sending letters to Jane. 3 of the most disturbing included one where he drew Yvette Pena's body at the crime scene covered in blood, a pentagram and a note claiming her mother is rotting in hell, and one featuring a rat. For the most part, Jane tried to ignore these letters, but when investigator Lopez personally reviewed them, he was shocked by their content as they were still filled with detailed descriptions of torture and violence. We have a couple letters that we can share with you now, as none of them appear to be the really graphic ones that we mentioned.
Meanwhile, Jaime continued accumulating more facial tattoos, but according to investigator Lopez, behind all those tattoos was just a scared, cowardly kid. Jaime spent over 5 years at Lerdo awaiting trial. Finally, in March of 2017, he was given a trial date. To everyone's surprise, he initially pled not guilty to Yvette Pena's murder. But then he attempted to negotiate with prosecutors, offering to change his plea to guilty, but only if they took the death penalty off the table. According to Dr. Haji, Jaime did this simply to assert dominance and control in some twisted power play. He was toying with the judicial system and tormenting the victim's family, since it didn't matter one bit whether he pled guilty or not. Members of Yvette's family were present at the court hearing and gave victim impact statements. Most prominently, Yvette's sister Daniel Pena Gonzalez spoke emotionally about her loss, but throughout her testimony, Jaime remained arrogant and emotionless. He openly mocked Danielle by rolling his eyes, yawning, and making gestures with his hands. 2017, KGET reporter Olivia Lavoie sat down with Jaime for an interview. He told her, "I love what I've experienced. To this day, if I can go back in time to change anything, would I? No. I would go back and do it again and over again. If I'm released, I will probably end up here again with the same case." On May 15th, 2017, Jaime was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The victim's family had specifically requested this date, as it would have been Yvette's 42nd birthday. Yvette's close friend, Jolene Clement, addressed the court saying, "Yvette is always going to be in our hearts. We love her, and we're happy she can finally rest in peace."
Jaime was then transferred to Corcoran State Prison, which has a notorious reputation as one of the most dangerous prisons in California. The facility houses some of the state's most violent offenders, many serving decades-long sentences. Jaime was placed in the SHU, a term used for the Security Housing Unit. Here, he was kept in complete isolation with no contact with other inmates. For everyone Jaime had victimized, this felt like justice. Jane was relieved knowing he'd be locked away for life and could never hurt anyone the way he had hurt her or Yvette. With some therapy, she even began healing from her PTSD and trauma. But what no one knew was that Jaime wasn't done. He would commit one more murder, this time behind bars. It would become one of the most gruesome and shocking murders ever committed inside a prison. For whatever reason, Jaime was no longer being kept in isolation, and so in March of 2019, nearly 2 years into Jaime's sentence at Corcoran, he was assigned a cellmate, 44-year-old Luis Romero, a convicted murderer serving a 27-year sentence. At the time, Luis was getting close to his parole date. But Jaime didn't want a cellmate, so he decided to rebel in the most horrific way imaginable. Within just 24 hours of Luis's transfer, Jaime brutally murdered him in a manner that defied all comprehension. This was apparently hidden from the guards as a bedsheet obstructed their view into the cell. While Luis was still alive, Jaime gouged out his eyes, removed his lungs, and severed his fingers. He then cut his head from his body, pulled out his intestines, and hung them on the light fixtures like decorations. Investigators even discovered a half-eaten sandwich in his cell that contained human remains. But the depravity didn't end there. Jaime used Luis's blood as paint, writing messages across the cell walls. One read, "I am the man with 1,000 faces." He mocked his victim's death by scrawling, "Ha ha 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 ha," repeatedly across the walls, kind of like the Joker. He even fashioned a grotesque necklace from Luis's intestines and wore it. What makes this even more disturbing is that Jaime accomplished all of this with nothing more than a razor blade.
The following morning on Saturday, March 9th, 2019, the prison guards made the gruesome discovery. Even hardened correctional officers who weren't unfamiliar with such criminals were absolutely shocked and sickened by what they had found. Once again, Jaime had managed to shock the world. Luis's family was devastated. They'd been eagerly awaiting his release, hoping he could start fresh. His sister, Dora Garcia, spoke to KGET News.
We're here because, for us, Luis, his family, he's more than just another prisoner, another victim of Osuna. He is my mother's son, my brother, and we love him. And we want to be here to represent the family so that everyone knows that Luis is not alone and that we're here for him. My brother had been there for many years, and he was eligible for parole soon. And my mother and my sister and I always hoped to see him once back home, but that hope is dead. There was 2 phone calls. The first one was when they they let us know that Luis had passed, and they informed us of how to recover his body. And then the second phone call was to ask for a money order that they wanted for us to recover his belongings. And after that, there was no more communication with them. Basically everything that we know, we've heard in the news.
This was definitely a critical flaw in the system, as Luis's grieving family wasn't even properly informed by the officials about what had happened. Perhaps they had done it to avoid a lawsuit, which might have been strong against the prison administration in this case. What's even more depressing is that 2 guards allegedly falsified reports saying they saw Luis alive during their rounds after he had been slain. The official report by the Office of the Inspector General stated a 3rd officer and a 4th officer allegedly did not report that they had each observed the first 2 officers fail to properly conduct the counts. The 1st officer also allegedly lied during his Office of Internal Affairs interview. One of the guards, Joseph Burns, even took unauthorized pictures of the crime scene which were later leaked to the public. U.S. District Court Judge Jennifer Thurston said of Officer Burns, "Due to defendant's actions, many of the photographs were ultimately leaked to online media platforms, and plaintiff endured the horrific experience of witnessing the photographs and in knowing that these photographs of her mutilated son have been seen by the general public, a severe disrespect to his mortal remains." As a result, Luis's mother, Doris Solaris, filed a lawsuit against the prison sergeant who placed her son in the same cell as Jaime. As of the date of this recording in November of 2025, this lawsuit is still ongoing. To add insult to injury, Jaime attempted to file a motion to obtain copies of the crime scene photos from his cell. Even though he had access to these photos through his attorney, we're guessing he did this to further hurt the victims' families and to waste everyone's time.
We are back now with your 17-court watch. Convicted killer Jaime Osuna won't be getting photos that show the aftermath of the second murder he is accused of. Today, a hearing was held on a request Osuna made to have the crime scene photos from the slaying of his cellmate, Luis Romero. Osuna allegedly tortured Romero and cut his head off in their cell. The judge rejected Osuna's request, pointing out he already can view the photos from his defense team. Osuna wanted to keep the photos personally in his cell. In December, psychiatrists who examined Osuna's medical history will testify on whether he is mentally competent to stand trial. He's already serving a life sentence for killing Yvette Pena in Bakersfield 9 years ago.
2 years later, in 2021, Jaime was found incompetent to stand trial for Luis's murder due to his mental state, as he was diagnosed with unspecified schizophrenia, antisocial personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, and post-traumatic stress disorder. Criminal proceedings were paused briefly. A few months later, when psychiatrists eventually ruled that Jaime was fit to stand trial, he once again pled not guilty. But even now, over 6 years later, his case for Luis's cold-blooded killing remains ongoing. At Jaime's 2023 resentencing hearing, more than a dozen of Yvette's friends and relatives attended, many wearing shirts printed with her photo and the words "in memory and justice." Yvette's longtime friend Tanya Perez spoke with heavy emotions, saying, "It makes your stomach turn just to even see his face, just to think that that's the last image that Yvette had in her mind." Yvette's sister, Danielle Pena Gonzalez, continues to remember her sister for the light she brought into people's lives rather than the tragedy that took her life away. She was always willing to help others and give out to people, even when she had as little as just $1 to her name. Shortly after Yvette's death, Danielle shared heartfelt words about her sister and, quote, "I knew she knew better, and I knew she was better. And I didn't understand how this great mom and this woman who was so involved in the church because she loved church and she loved God and she always preached, no matter what, I love her. I always did. I never stopped. No matter where she lived, no matter what she did, no matter how mad I was at her decisions, I still loved her."
The crimes Jaime committed and the horrors he inflicted are truly unparalleled. Yet, the families of the victims continue to show remarkable resilience in the face of absolute terror. Yvette's family could barely afford a cremation service and a small reception at the time. They weren't financially stable, and the sudden loss left them struggling not just emotionally, but financially as well.
I'm not a sister anymore. No.
Life has not been the same for Danielle Gonzalez after losing her older and only sister, Yvette Pena, who she says practically raised her, senselessly killed by Jaime Osuna in 2011.
Yes, next month will be 13 years, but it doesn't feel like 13 years. The pain's still there.
The anniversary of her death bringing all the feelings.
The holidays are really hard. It kind of starts with Halloween. She loved dressing up. She loved Halloween. She loved passing out candies to the kids and seeing everybody's costumes. And then Thanksgiving, we love to cook, we love to eat, and so our kitchen was always smelling good, and to not have her here, and that was the first holiday that we missed with her. She was murdered in November.
The family hopes this season brings the closure they couldn't get 13 years ago. The murder left Pena's body unsuitable for viewing.
We weren't given an option to bury her. We were told we had no choice but to cremate her. It felt like there wasn't a final closure. There wasn't a body to see one last time, a viewing. It was a notification of her death, and then here's a box of ashes. It just felt so unreal. We want to bury them and have a place to visit.
a place where family can finally visit Peña, remembered by her selflessness.
What I loved about her the most was her giving, her absolute giving. There was times in her life where she had nothing to give, but she would still give. Whether it was the last dollar to her name, clothes off of her back, literally.
Nearly 13 years after Yvette's passing in 2024, Danielle launched a GoFundMe campaign to raise funds for a proper burial for her sister. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to meet the fundraising goal and had to postpone the burial of Yvette's ashes until a later date. Still, the family chose to celebrate Yvette's life in a meaningful way. On May 16, 2024, they hosted a celebration of life and 50th birthday gathering in her honor, inviting anyone who wished to remember her to join. The event was filled with warmth, love, and shared memories.